Hey guys, welcome to Brian's Man Cave, episode 13. Today I'm going to be talking about two of my favorite horror movies. Well, not just horror movies, actually horror characters, because there was quite a few movies based on these characters. And so the first one I'm going to be talking about is actually a classic character, which we've had for a very long time and is very popular, and we all know him as Dracula. But actually the one I'm going to be talking about specifically is Nosferatu. Now, Nosferatu is Dracula. It was the first Dracula movie ever made back in 1921, and it's black and white, it's silent, and the reason why I learned about this movie was, I believe it was way back in grade 8, we did a section in one of my classes on classic horror films, and this was the one we started with, and I remember thinking, well, am I going to enjoy a black and white silent film? And they're calling it a horror or whatever. But I was quite surprised when I watched it. It was quite entertaining, and the character, even today is spooky as crap. Like, look at this guy. They just don't make Dracula like this anymore, right? So, and from what I understood, or from what my research was that there was some kind of dispute with the Bram Stoker estate about using Dracula, or using the name Dracula, or the story, or whatever. So what's his name? F.W. Murnau had to actually, he didn't want to abandon the project, so he just renamed him to Count Orlok and moved him to a different place. But the same storyline, very similar to the actual Dracula storyline. I believe this is one of the only, or I don't know if it's the only one, but it's one of the few Draculas that actually dies by sunlight at the end. And, after a while, I believe this one came out, when was this, in the 70s? So they made a remake of it. They kept the name Nosferatu, and this is long after many Dracula movies came out, so they were able to keep the Dracula name, but they wanted to just remake actual Nosferatu. So they stuck with the same looking character. This is Klaus Kinski, both I believe German. And this one's not bad. This one's actually in color. This one has speech, obviously because it was made much later. And it's not bad. It's kind of a difficult movie to find now because the Nosferatu has been done over, reproduced on DVD a few times over and on video, and whereas this one I haven't seen it very often. I mean, I got lucky one day and I found it in a video store. But anyways, yeah, so it's all right. And then the last one to come along was Shadow of the Vampire, which is a very interesting movie. It's kind of like a blur between reality and drama, where they kind of cook up the story that perhaps the actor from Nosferatu, the original, Max Schreck, himself was a vampire, and that the director, Murnau, actually found him in the cave somewhere and decided to use him as Dracula, or Count Orlok for this matter. In this one, he ends up, the Max Schreck ends up killing pretty much everybody in the cast. And it's really interesting, but what's more interesting in this movie is they actually, they show how they would have filmed some of the scenes in the original Nosferatu, which I thought was interesting, because, you see Hollywood today, and you see, everything's done on computers, and the special effects and all that, whereas this, we're going back to the 20s, early filmmaking, and they had very limited effects. They had no speech. They had to deal with lighting issues. I believe most of the scenes were shot at nighttime, or during the day. I mean, for the nighttime scenes, because it's black and white. Who cares? But yeah, this is a very interesting movie. And it's a very good take on the concept that Dracula was actually alive. But yeah, and so, to round up the whole Nosferatu, I just wanted to show the actual figure that I found in I believe I found this in a comic book store, and I had to have it. I looked at this thing, I'm like, that's awesome. They actually made a figure. It's very close to how he looked. I think they went a little bit dramatic, over dramatic. Yeah, and they got the rats in there because the story of Dracula deals with the plague and the rats and stuff. But you know, this is a pretty decent figure. I mean, he looks pretty scary. He looks pretty gruesome. And you know, out of all of the Dracula characters, this one I think is my favorite. Is the the Nosferatu character. Okay, so over to my second favorite, and that would be Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare on Elm Street is probably one of the first, I think the first horror movie I actually saw when I was younger. It was either this or The Exorcist, and that's quite a difference in movies. But I know that Freddy Krueger was my favorite horror villain of all time. And, you know, Freddy goes way back before I even knew about Nosferatu and knew about, you know, really cared about the Dracula character. I would say that Freddy was definitely my favorite out of all of them. And I've probably seen this one the most, which is Nightmare on Elm Street, the first movie that came out in the series. You know, this one, it started a whole new generation of horror. Like, sure, we had Jason, you know, Friday the 13th, which, you know, his character really didn't get established until about the third movie. And I found that a lot of the Jason movies, they were great, I've seen them all, but I found that they were very repetitive, that there wasn't a whole lot of, you know, stuff going on. Nightmare on Elm Street kind of, you know, stretched that and created this whole, you know, there's a whole storyline that branches off into different generations of people, and they make every movie completely different from the last movie. The second one, which, you know, was all right. This is the special edition box set, so these covers look a little bit different than what I remember them. But the second one was all about possession, in a sense, where Freddy was possessing the child that moved into the house. If you haven't seen the original Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger basically goes after the children of the parents that murdered him, but he was a horrible child rapist when he was alive, so they had reason to do so. So the first one's all about this one character, Nancy, whose mother, I guess, or parents were the ones who spearheaded the whole operation. So in part two, Nancy's not in the picture. It's just the house on Elm Street, and this poor sap moves in and becomes possessed and starts killing his friends. He starts killing everybody around him, and he becomes Freddy, essentially. It's an okay sequel. Wasn't one of the best. But if you want to go to the best, you have to go to Elm Street 3. This one, The Dream Warriors, is probably known as like one of the more popular ones, especially when I was a kid. And this one, it's a little bit lighter than the first film. It's not as there isn't as many dark scenes. They're not trying to make it scary. It was a little more campy. There was, you know, some references to jokes like drug jokes, and then there was Dungeons and Dragons master in there, and there was a puppeteer, and the death scenes are epic in this one. I mean, there's a scene where the guy's veins get ripped out and he becomes a puppet. So, you know, there's so many good scenes in this movie. I wouldn't say it was scary at all. It was, you know, the first one actually has that potential to kind of scare you, but this no, you're getting into, but it's a good movie altogether, and I would say it's probably one of the best ones as far as entertaining goes. And then, of course, we have, you know, the rest of them. Like Part 4 was okay. The only thing I could say about Part 4 was it was the first horror or Freddy movie I actually got to see in theater, because I was actually old enough at the time to go to see it, which I was quite impressed by. But 5 kind of sucked. There's nothing else to say about 5. Freddy's Dead was interesting. They did a 3D treatment on this one. Again, it wasn't that good. The way they kill him off, it's stupid. And so, you know, then we moved into the new Nightmare, which really isn't a Nightmare on Elm Street. It's a movie about Nightmare on Elm Street. The characters are the actors from the movie. Mostly the first one and the third one, I believe. And Freddy comes to real life and goes after the actors. So it's kind of neat. It goes all weird at the end, and you find out it's not really Freddy. And it's, you know, I would recommend it if you want to see something different. And of course, we can't forget what also came out, Freddy versus Jason. Now, this is something that we probably would have wanted to see when we were, in the 80s, going, the two guys squaring off. And actually, when I saw this, I was not expecting to like it. I thought I was going to hate the movie. I was going in with very low expectations, and I didn't hate it. It's actually a decent movie. As you can see, I actually bought the DVD. So it's good. They did a really good crossover with this movie. There was no scenes in there where you're like, what the hell. It was good. I mean, it's kind of an odd concept where Freddy takes Jason out of hell and puts him down to scare the crap out of people, so then Freddy can come back. Kind of an oddball thing, but and then we go all the way up to the remake. I really don't know what to say about this. I saw it in theater. I had to see it. I was following this, when they were making this movie. I was kind of excited. I wanted to see how they were going to spin it around, how they're going to modernize it. It's okay. The guy who plays Freddy in this one, different actor. The first Freddy was Robert Englund, the only Freddy. But this guy, Earl, what's his name? Jackie, blah, blah, blah. I forgot his name. That's right there. Jackie Earl Haley. He's a good actor. It was okay. I think what they did wrong in this movie was they put too much focus on the kids. Like, they really just brought in the kids' lives into this and their backstories, and too much boring stuff just happens. And you're like, let's just get to the Freddy part. And so the only thing I can say that's neat about this one is they do go into his backstory a little bit more. In the original Nightmare on Elm Street, they really only talk about it in the basement, and it's like a 20-second scene. This one, they kind of go in depth. They show what he looked like as a human. They show, in the original series, you don't get to see what he looked like until, I think, the last one. But, it's an okay movie. Sometimes I think, it's kind of boring, but for a remake, I doubt they'll make a sequel. I think they probably said, it didn't really fly, so forget it. And so there really wasn't a lot of stuff that I collected as far as toys and stuff. I did grab the figure, which I saw it. I think I found it in the same store I found the Nosferatu. It's okay. It's got the Nightmare on Elm Street sticker on there. It's got this little guy, which I believe was the puppet from Nightmare on Elm Street 3. So I don't know why they put him there, and then they put the Nightmare on Elm Street 1 sticker there. So I don't know what they were thinking. But, I mean, he looks pretty decent. He's all covered in blood. His face, he kind of looks like the Scarecrow. I don't know what, I guess it's very difficult to make him look like Freddy. But he's got, he's got the hat, he's got the glove, he's got everything in there. Really looks cool. This is part of that whole movie Maniacs thingy with the Spawn and the Kiss and all that. So it's a pretty decent figure, as far as detail is concerned anyways. And the last thing I wanted to kind of show you was my glove, because I actually got this when I was a kid. When I was younger, they didn't really have a lot of horror merchandise. They didn't really have a lot of Freddy stuff, at least not here in Canada. I found this. I think I might have been 8 years old, 9 years old, somewhere like that. I found this in Florida, of all places. There was a store. We were actually on a trip to Disney World, and we popped into a store in Orlando, and it had all these movie props and Halloween costumes and stuff. And I saw this, and I was just freaking out. I'm like, I gotta have that glove. I gotta have it. They had a mask, which was really expensive, so I couldn't have it. But this I was able to get. And this one, like, I've seen gloves come out since then from the Halloween selection, and they're just not as good. Like, this one actually, like, you could see the detail in there. Like, they actually put a lot of detail in there. The glove looks right. I've seen other ones where they have, like, silver or something in these areas here, and, it's the wrong color glove or something. This one actually looks authentic. This looks like from the movie. So, I was kind of lucky to grab this, and I was able to beat Freddy for Halloween one year. I remember that. It really difficult to put the costume together at the time. Like, they didn't have the costumes you could buy. But otherwise, cool glove. I held on to it. I think I'll always keep this glove. It just looks cool. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you liked it. Let me know if you like these characters, or if you have other characters that you think are your favorite horror movie, and or your favorite horror character, and leave a comment below, and I'd love to talk about it. Anyways, subscribe, and let me know what you think.